Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jon Kazarian, who's the founder and CEO of Accelevents, and marketing, data, metaverse are all topics we're talking about today. Enjoy my conversation with Jon. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. Today, I'm extremely happy to speak with Jon Kazarian. Jon is the founder and CEO of Accelevents. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about data. We're going to talk about marketing. We're going to talk about the role of events into marketing. And we're going to talk about, of course, entrepreneurship. Jon, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me on.
And we're not going to make people jealous, but we're both in South Florida, right?
That we are. It's beautiful.
It's always what I say to my friends in Belgium when they say, what do you do when you cold in South Florida? I said, you open the door and you walk outside. So tell me a little bit about what is your journey and how did you get into our industry?
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting ride, and to some extent, it kind of I found my way into it unintentionally. I had always been hosting events, growing up throughout college, even a little bit after college, and unfortunately, at the end of one of these events I was hosting, it was about a 100-person event. I found out that my cousin at the age of 17 was diagnosed with cancer. So wanted to do something for her and ultimately decided that, I'd thrown a bunch of events before. Why don't I throw a bigger one and raise some money? So a friend of mine and I, we decided to rent out the aquarium in Boston. I went down there, put my credit card down. I had to sell 185 tickets to break even for that first event, basically to be able to pay my credit card bill. And we ended up selling 840. But going into that event, realized that in order to run the auction and the raffle in a way that was going to raise the most money we possibly could, we needed to do that digitally. So I looked around for solutions and frankly, just couldn't find anything that was either good or affordable or easy to use. And for somebody who is hosting their first large scale event, there is just so many stressors on you already. Technology doesn't need to be another one. So after essentially realizing that there wasn't something out there that was going to make life easier for us, we decided to build our own. Did that. It worked really well. We got great feedback from the attendees, from the organization we hosted the event for, and we raised about 65 grand for the organization in our first event. So yeah, we were thrilled about that, but ultimately realized that we could be offering this technology to other organizations like ourselves and decided to launch a business around that. So did this nights and weekends for a while. And at the time, it was fully focused on fundraising. But after a while, we started to receive feedback from organizers that they wanted everything under one roof. So ticketing and payment processing as well. And as we began to go down that path, we then started to focus more heavily on for-profit events. So everything from festivals and conferences, concerts, trade shows, et cetera. Things were picking up. It was in 2019 here, we had hired our first salesperson, ended up closing out that year at about $370K in revenue. So had grown a decent amount, doubled year over year, but we were still quite small. And I was still working full time in another job at this point. But it was looking like we were going to be able to do $1 million in revenue in 2020. And at that point, it was my intention to go full time as we started to approach that. But unfortunately, the world essentially shut down in March of 2020. And and at that point, with all the canceled events, the refunded tickets, we not only ran out of money, but we were in the hole. Because we were a bootstrap business, we were basically relying on the inflows from the events that were we're using our technology in order to pay for engineering, pay for continuing to invest in marketing and building the product. So at that point, with having essentially ran out of money, I was fortunate that I was able to convince my father, and fortunate that he had the cash available to do so. He invested 75 grand in the business, and that allowed us to pivot. We pivoted to focus on virtual events, which obviously were in particularly high demand at that point in time. And things just started to accelerate. We ended up closing out 2020 at about 3.3 million in revenue. So essentially 10xing what we had done in 2019. Yep. And at this point, we were almost entirely focused on conferences. So fundraisers were essentially behind us. And we were doing everything for these events, from trade shows to conferences that in some cases, one of them had 1,600 sessions over the course of 4 days. I mean, you name it. And the size of these events ranged from 100 people to tens of thousands. Again, one-day events, multi-day events, And really the area that we focused on was ensuring that not only the organizers putting on the event were getting value from that experience, but also that the exhibitors and the sponsors were seeing value as well. And that ended up being a really interesting funnel for us, because by really focusing on that other stakeholder that's part of the experience, they naturally turned to us when it was time to host their own event. So, that's a little bit that sort of brought us into the product that we're focused on today. Over the past year and a half or so, we've continued to double down on that, really focus on the user experience, all with this mission of how can we make life easier for event organizers? Because as you know, as I know, and anybody else who's hosted an event, as you approach the days leading up to that event, you're basically giving up another hour of sleep every day until you get to event day. So anything that we can do to regain a couple of extra minutes for organizers goes a long way.
And so you have an online element, you have a fundraising element. What else are you offering, or what are the needs you think that should be covered?
Yeah, so what we're providing is pretty much the entirety of the technology needed for an organizer to host an event experience, be it online, hybrid, in person, everything from badge printing, check-in, lead capture for exhibitors in the in-person world, and then the entire venue, the virtual experience. And again, from conference to workshops through trade shows, you name it, we're there to support it.
And you also have a fundraising aspect of it?
So we do have fundraising technology that's focused on auctions, raffles, fund to need, and text to give. But again, that's not as much of a focus for us these days.
So when you look at the market, and before we get into the data, the marketing part, and when you look at the state of the market in your competition,
yeah,
I assume, because I also lead a technology company in ticketing here in the US, the development costs are through the roof. So how do you sustain that? And what is your vision in terms of development to maintain an edge over the competition, or to answer the needs of the market?
Yeah, so there's a couple of aspects of that. I mean, the first is, yes, development is expensive, but it becomes a lot more expensive when you're building the wrong thing. So the number one thing that you can do is ensure that you have an incredibly powerful feedback loop from your customers through product to your engineering team. And from day one, I mean, even when I was working another job and bootstrapping this business, there was times where I'd be on the highway and pull over to respond to a chat message in real time. And even today, our median response time on chat's 26 seconds. So what we've done is built this feedback loop that results in us really understanding our customers and their needs, so that we can ensure that what we are focused on building is the right thing. Now, that said, engineering is the biggest team within our company, and it will continue to be so, because as you know, running a tech business, the second you take your foot off the gas there, you fall behind.
Yeah.
And in this industry in particular, there is a lot of legacy technology out there. I think also part of the reason there is that any change to event technology is scary anytime you deploy it, because you have, it's not like a CRM or an analytics platform where if something breaks, you just fix it and redeploy in 10 minutes. If you've got an event that's live, it always has to be available. You can't have a check-in experience go down when you got 1,200 people outside the door. That's completely unacceptable. So there has to be a very high degree of rigor and QA, quality assurance, associated with any sort of development.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very similar in what I do with CQTix. Changing system is like a heart transplant. And in the meantime, you want to have the most up-to-date technology than going with the first heart that was transplanted by, I think, Dr. Barnard decades ago. So that's always an investment for that. When you look at the events, obviously you and I know the industry and know the importance in terms of marketing. But if you're speaking with, let's say you're speaking with a CMO that has absolutely no clue about events, the only thing that they know is, oh yeah, we did a welcome dinner, or I plan my niece's birthday, which of course it's just want to laugh. What would you tell them about the importance of event in their marketing strategy?
Yeah, there's so many different angles you could take with that conversation. So I think like any good sale, you have to understand the customer there. But the reason that people are turning towards events in an increasing fashion, and particularly with us, is a couple of different fold. One of which is the way that digital marketing is getting flipped on its head right now. With the reduction in third-party cookie tracking, it's led to a much greater importance on first-party data. And as you think about the different mechanisms for capturing first-party data, you've got like ebook downloads and maybe webinars, a forum on your website. But the reality is all that does is tell you that singular action that somebody took. And when you think about an event experience, there's so much more information that you're gathering as it pertains to that particular attendee that you can then use, be it in your ads and your targeting and building audience, but also in the way that you're communicating and personalizing your messaging with your audience. So that's sort of part one of it, is reshaping the digital marketing stack. But the other side of it is that you talked about the competition out there for us. And there are a lot of players in our space, no question about that. A lot of which popped up in the past 2 years or so, and they're more focused on the virtual side than in person. But the reality is when you're trying to build a brand and establish your presence, it's more than just running those ads. You need to be there. You need to build experiences. You need to bring opportunities for people to connect within the industry. And there's no better way to do that than events.
Face-to-face or online?
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yes, there's a lot of people, the vocal minority, that believe that it has to be done in person. But the reality is those are the people that went to events before the pandemic. The people who didn't feel comfortable stepping into that room, that would have stood in the corner if they were forced to be there, they don't miss it. They thrive in the opportunity to have virtual experiences, to be in a situation that they're more comfortable interacting and engaging, accessing that content that they wouldn't have accessed because they wouldn't have gone to that event because it made them uncomfortable. And that's completely fine. And virtual events just open up this massive opportunity, this door for folks. And that's just talking about it purely from an emotional perspective, but also think about the globalization of it. With the price of travel these days, it's absurdly expensive to travel to and from events, especially internationally. And as companies continue to build international teams, as the workforce is continuing to work remote, virtual events are also an incredible way to get people together from all over the globe.
No, absolutely. And I'm sure that if you go deep into the strategy of an organization, you don't have only or exclusively one of the other, one only digital or only face-to-face. When we came back to the office with my team, one of the person asked me, but we were very effective when we were remote. What's your take on it? And I look at him and said, look, you remember the conversation you had at the office this morning with those two colleagues about this customer? He said, yes, that doesn't happen on a Zoom conference. He said, yeah, right. So I guess it's really rethinking your strategy, not only in terms of marketing, but also on the goals you want to achieve and see, okay, for this one virtual, for this one face-to-face. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of organizations that are basically rebuilding their event program. And it is a mix of both virtual and in-person experiences. The in-person experiences that we're seeing do tend to be a little bit smaller in nature and more localized. I think in part just because COVID is still present, travel costs are high, and it's a more comfortable way for people to ease back into in-person. But the other side of it is there's a lot of businesses out there that never ran events before. And events are expensive. 25% of B2B marketing budgets are events. So virtual can also be a great way for people to break the ice there and ease their way into hosting events, starting to build basically a Rolodex of speakers and exhibitors and sponsors for those events. And then when you're ready, you're going to have success with that in-person experience because you already have these people that are part of your ecosystem.
Right. Talking about the ecosystem, and that's one of the things that you do, and that's also I'm also very interested for the listener here, is about the data. Yeah. So the data, you hear left and right. It's almost as common as the word pivot. But when you look at the data, there's so much. So what do you advise your customer, and or why do you see your customer more looking in terms of data, for one, and how they are mining it, how they are using it for future events?
Yeah. So I think that in itself is actually part of the issue. There's so much focus on how is that event data going to be used after the event, maybe for the next event or for assisting sales. And don't get me wrong, there is so much opportunity there. But where I think the biggest gap is how are we going to use that data during our event to make that experience better? And the folks that are getting that right are the ones that we're seeing really create some incredibly successful experiences. And it's not always the most complex thing in the world, but there's things that you can do. And if the platform you're using has the real-time tracking in place, you can adjust the experience on the fly. And this can be in person or virtually. But as an example, you may have one speaker that gets a ton of engagement, a ton of questions. People stay throughout the duration of that speech as compared to everybody else. You can then go reach out to that speaker and ask them to host a workshop or something else later that day, maybe the next day, to re-engage your audience, and do that as an opportunity to remarket to your attendees. And I'll focus on virtual for a second here. In the world of virtual, it's very easy to get distracted, as we all know. I mean, most of us have multiple monitors running. It's easy for your attention to drift. But if you as the organizer can come up with different ways to reactivate and re-engage your audience and bring them back into the platform throughout the day, because people are going to drop off or jump off because they have a meeting or something else. If you can use this information to figure out what's most interesting to them and then create campaigns to bring them back into the experience throughout the day, that's how you're going to get increased engagement. And that in turn leads to keeping your sponsors happy and your exhibitors happy, ensuring that they're getting the value out of their experience as well. Another thing would be looking at those exhibitors. The exhibitors who are having the most success generating leads throughout the experience. Well, let's look at that every hour, identify what they might be doing differently, and go to our bottom performing exhibitors and coach them. Because if they don't have a good turnout, they're not going to come back. And I've seen some interesting data out there that I believe it was 37% of exhibitors who exhibited in a virtual event for the first time, interacting with the company, then sponsored their first in-person experience. So again, talking about the opportunity to use that virtual event as a mechanism for building that relationship with those sponsors and exhibitors, and then translate it into your in-person event, where you're likely to ask for a much bigger check from them.
Interesting. What I've heard the last 2 years, and that has been my experience as well, is that online virtual works very well for many different type of events, but one, which is the trade show. Now, you seem to have counterintuitive data or case study. Can you share a little bit about that? Because for me, the trade show part is the one that is the least convenient when it comes to a virtual event.
Yeah, so there's a difference between a full-fledged trade show and providing opportunities for a dozen or 24 exhibitors or partners to participate alongside your event. And I would agree, when you have a 500-person trade show, that becomes almost unnavigable in the virtual experience. And also, I mean, those are much more palpable experiences, right? You're used to walking around and picking things up and holding them in your hands. But when you're talking about even something like a software company, where they may have different partners, integration partners, co-marketing partners, resellers, et cetera, that can do some sort of digital activation within your event experience and drive people to interact and engage, that's where we're seeing a ton of success. And that comes to also providing the opportunity for those exhibitors to be there and be able to actually capture that information from those attendees in real time. Basically just being human. Those sort of microsites that are just dead pages within an event platform, that doesn't move the needle. You have to staff it and treat it like an in-person experience. You have to be there, and you have to be there on video and be there on chat. And you have to have a platform that's going to enrich that and tell you something about the person that you're talking to. Because if you're doing a trade show and let's say you were selling power tools, right? If somebody picked up a saw, you're not going to walk up to them and start talking to them about drills. So you need to know what they care about and be able to have that relevant conversation, or else, yeah, you're going to have low engagement.
And so in terms of data, are you storing this data on your own server? Is it on the customer server? And what about, we're hearing more and more about malware and cybersecurity. Does it affect you? And what's your advice for an events organizer on that matter?
Yeah, so we're hosted on AWS.
Okay.
So all the data lives
Amazon
on AWS
Web Services.
Yeah, that Amazon Web Service that we manage. Yeah, the data is kept. We don't do any remarketing though. So your attendees are not going to get spam emails from us trying to get them to go to a different event that they didn't register for. But that a profile that attendee creates does carry over. So if they host, or if you host multiple events and that attendee comes from one event to the next and they had connected with one person, the platform will remind them that they had interacted with this person in a past event. Same goes for those exhibitors, so that again you can have a more relevant conversation. Hey, I remember chatting with you 3 months ago. In terms of the security side of things, nothing is downloaded with our platform. So those issues, it's entirely web-based. Those issues really should be alleviated. We haven't had any issues with that throughout the duration of our company.
Mm-hmm. Understood. When you look at all this data that companies can be, what are some of the most successful case study that you've had that you can share just to inspire people? And this is how you can use data, and this is how it's impacting the bottom line in your business.
Yeah. So I can't name the name here, but there's one organization that actually, this was interestingly more of a trade show. They sold $7 million worth of equipment over the duration of 3 days of the event. And again, a lot of it went down to them being able to load those products in, or each of their exhibitors being able to do so. And then those exhibitors being able to have relevant conversations with folks about the things they actually care about. But that's, again, more in the trade show world. What we're seeing a lot of success with these days is organizations that are hosting marketing events. And they can be anything from a customer appreciation event, a training event, a product launch. Product launches are a big one, especially in the world today where there are a lot of competitors in many industries, and building that relationship with the audience, being able to make a big splash out of each product announcement goes a really long way. So we have a number of organizations, Zapier being one, Vidyard is another, well-known companies where being able to make that big splash and get people together from around the world to learn and see what these tools are going to do and how those tools are going to make their life easier, it makes all the difference. And then, if you think about from a marketing perspective, the information that you're gathering there, you may be a company like, let's say HubSpot, for example. Mm-hmm. You might have somebody who's on your CRM product, but it just so happens that they're spending a bunch of time joining workshops and learning about this marketing product that you offer. So as an organizer of this event, we can look at this information and see, well, interestingly, this attendee who isn't using this product showed a lot of interest in it here, and then take that information and figure out, okay, we need to have the account managers reach out and see, well, what was it that prompted their interest in this offering? Maybe their Marketo subscription is about to renew and they're debating if they want to stick or switch over and centralize on HubSpot. So taking all that information and then ensuring that information is passing into your CRM or marketing automation system so that you can do that cross-referencing and figuring out how to segment and market to those different audiences accordingly.
Amazing. So in this example of cross-referencing, do I understand well that all the information is actually automated to go into the CRM, and then the salesperson can have a look at it and decide on the action to take?
Yeah. So we have native integrations with a number of CRMs so they can do just that. But the other thing is our platform is also a system of record for all of this event data. And not just within that one event experience, but across the entirety of your events and bringing it all into one place. So again, you can use that information both as a sales mechanism, but probably more likely as a marketing tool for building those segmented lists and then making sure that the messaging that you're sending out for each of those event experiences is customized and relevant so that you can generate the highest engagement and registration rate.
That's awesome. I clearly see where you're bringing the value, and that I think is phenomenal. If we can just try to zoom in the individual meeting planner, the person that has a small company, or they're on their own, or they have like a 10 people staff, and maybe they're just starting with a CRM, and maybe they are in the beginning of their business. What is your advice for them in terms of advising their own customer, bringing value to their own customer with data, with marketing, and the right question to ask?
In terms of how to use the data?
In terms of, so I'm a meeting planner, I have a customer, which is a corporation. How can I help them do better with events? And what should I know about data and marketing integration so that I can provide more value to this customer and asking the right question or suggesting the right tools or the right way to go about it?
Yeah, if you want to approach this from the data lens, and interestingly, we've seen marketing ops become much more involved in the procurement process, especially with the mid and enterprise segment. If you're an event planner in that realm, try to get that conversation set up with the marketing ops person. Try to understand how that data is going to flow into their existing systems and how they're intending to use it so that you can offer guidance in terms of the other ways that they can use that information beyond what they might have initially conceived of, and show them how you're going to make their life easier and get them better results by doing so. Certainly, you don't want to over-engineer and complicate anything. So also consider using tools that have those native integrations in place so that the marketing ops person isn't having to dig through API documentation and trying to figure out how to navigate data from one event platform to a data warehouse to a marketing automation platform into a CRM and then over to an ads platform. That's all can get quite complex. But if you can just understand how they're planning to use that event data and find a way to offer some guidance on how to take it a step further, you can really help them move the needle.
Awesome. Did I hear correctly? You said that the marketing people are now getting more involved into the procurement process?
Well, marketing people have always been, but marketing operations people are becoming much more involved.
That's amazing, and it's a great thing because the image that I've had about procurement in general is that they were buying toilet paper like they were buying services. So it's a good news.
Yeah, it's what we are seeing is the buying decision has become a longer term decision. Organizations want to build that deeper integration today. I don't mean necessarily coding it, but they want to pick a solution that's going to be able to scale with their programming and be able to facilitate both the virtual and in-person experiences. So with that, the ops teams are naturally getting involved so that they can make sure that the plumbing is in place to do what they need it to do.
Excellent. I cannot not ask you, we're talking about technology and events. What's your take on the metaverse? And how you see the event going there?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that we're going to get there. I have an Oculus. It's sitting in the box in my closet and it's been there for 18 months. So again, I think we're going to get there. I don't know when, but it's not going to be tomorrow. When you're building an event and you're thinking about accessibility, and again, that's a huge opportunity with virtual events. They create a level of accessibility that's in many ways unreached with in-person experiences. Introducing another requirement or something that gets in the way of accessibility is doing you a disservice. And it doesn't necessarily mean accessibility from the perspective of somebody who's impaired in some way, but just from ease of use. People are at your event to network, to interact, to engage, to self-educate from your content. If they have to figure out how to navigate which buttons to click on the keyboard to walk around the environment, until that becomes normal, you don't want that to be your first experience as the event organizer, unless it's on a smaller scale event and you know the audience is going to really be enriched by that activation.
That's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. Jon, I can speak hours with you and listen to you. It's obviously a fascinating story. Let me ask you one last question, but really focus on you and your development. You started this company, Bootstrapped, while you were having another business. You now in Inc. 5000. Congratulations. If we meet in 1 year with a bottle of champagne, what will we be celebrating for you in Accelevents?
We will have doubled the number of event organizers whose life we made easier.
Clear. Excellent. Well, listen, thank you so much for spending time with me today. And you're obviously at the edge of all the use of technology and data. I think that's extremely important for everybody who's listening here. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mentioned the response time on our chat, but I challenge everybody to give that a try. Go over to our website, accelevents.com, ACCEL events, and shoot us a message. If you don't hear back from us in 30 seconds, find me on LinkedIn and give me a hard time. It's J Kazarian or Jon Kazarian on LinkedIn, as well as Twitter. And I'm looking forward to hopefully not hearing from anybody because you heard from us in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Jon, for sharing your knowledge with us. Very interesting, absolutely fascinating what you're doing and the opportunities that are coming for our industry in the future. If you want to connect with me, please go on LinkedIn, follow me there, or join the Facebook group, www.eventbusinessformula.com/group. And if you enjoy listening to this conversation and learn anything, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.